I am the president of the HBS Club of Toronto, global board member of Harvard Alumni in Healthcare. I'm delighted to welcome you folks in a collaboration with our fellow HBS and Harvard clubs from around Canada, United States, Europe, Middle East, and the world. We are grateful to our fellow club presidents and executives for our collaboration, and we're very excited to have our today's discussion with Dr. Mathew Knowles. He is an author, professor, lecturer, motivational speaker, music executive, artist manager, entrepreneur, fighter, and cancer survivor. Those would be the words used to sum up the life and career of Dr. Mathew Knowles thus far. Dr. Mathew Knowles. Matthew, welcome.
Good morning, good afternoon, maybe where you are. I'm on the West Coast here in California, so it's morning, 9, 10 in the morning. I'm really grateful to be here, excited to be here. And just listening to your introduction just reminds me and gives me gratitude, Boris. You know, I learned a long time ago that it's not the destination, it's the journey. And I continue to be on life's journey.
That's fantastic. Dr. Knowles, Mathew, in terms of journeys, every journey has a beginning. That's for sure. And in terms of your journey, could you tell us a little bit about your early history and when people lead dialogue, consciously or not, with generations and with mentors that come before them? Curious what profound lessons would have been passed down to you from your family that have shaped your worldview and your message and how you see the world today?
Yeah, sure, Boris. I think we all understand. I know a lot of your viewers are from around the world, but I grew up in Alabama in the 50s, 1952. I'm 70 years old. And some of you might understand and have read history to understand that in 1952, Alabama and Mississippi were probably one of the two most racist states in America. And so I grew up in an extremely racist environment. I never went to a Black school. So I want you to think about that. Just imagine and picture elementary school, 1958, George Wallace is the governor, and not going to a Black school, not going to a Black junior high school or a Black high school. I integrated all levels of education, from junior high, elementary, high school, even University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. My mother went to high school with Coretta King, Martin Luther King's wife. And so she took up the same torch of desegregation. So it was very challenging for me as a child, being Black in a white environment, being beaten by the state troopers, being spit on, being electrocuted, taught me a lot of valuable lessons, being laughed at, made to feel less than. But it didn't deter me. It didn't deter my power of believing that underneath the surface and beyond the visible changes, there were things occurring in the South. And I believed in the power of change. My parents were poor, not very educated, and they had day jobs, but they also were entrepreneurs, and they used those assets. My dad was a truck driver, but that's the owners to let him have the usage of the truck. And he would go tear down the houses and sell the wood, the copper, all the metals. He would buy used cars, and he would sell all the parts. My mother worked as a colored maid and she would convince the white woman she worked with to give her all the hand-me-down clothes that she had. And not only her, she convinced her to ask her friends. And on the weekend, my mother and her two best friends would make these beautiful quilts. And so my parents were entrepreneurs. My grandfather on both sides were entrepreneurs. So I am third generation entrepreneur. Although I grew up in such a traumatic environment.
Dr. Knowles, and there's a lot to be said for growing up in a traumatic environment and then not becoming bitter, becoming impactful, becoming entrepreneurial, like you said. Can you tell us a little bit more about your passion for entrepreneurship, what has enabled you to hone your skills and perseverance in the unfortunate and sad environment, right, that you were growing up in and working to success despite that very negative environment?
Well, first, I think it's important to understand that our current circumstances are not a reflection of what we're capable of achieving. Think about that. We often look at our current circumstances and we say, oh, wow, things are so bad. There's no way out. But that's not an indication or reflection of what we're capable of achieving. And I have always been taught in the power of entrepreneurship, there's four major parts to it: the who, the what, the why, the where. Who is the customer? What is my product? Why should they buy it? And where should they, and how distribution-wise can they purchase it? Those are the foundations of entrepreneurship. And once you understand the creative process of starting a business and going through that creative process and building the right team and having that right product and making sure that you do focus groups to get feedback from your customers. Those are key and valuable things that we learn in entrepreneurship. But there's also a thing that most people don't know, Boris, and that's called intrapreneurship. Intrapreneurship. And that's when we work in an organization. We might be head of a department, we might be head of a division, but we run our area as if it's our own company, with the same passion and the same approach that we would if it was our own company. Everyone can't be entrepreneurs. Some are intrapreneurs. So it's real important that we understand the difference and understand that there's power in both.
Dr. Knowles, thank you. And in terms of the power and intrapreneurship, is that the kind of power and the kind of application of your entrepreneurial knowledge and skills and passions that you applied in your early career? Can you tell us a little bit about how you proceeded into the business world?
Well, it goes back to my parents always taught me never stop dreaming. And I used to dream a lot as a kid. And the one thing I always wanted to be was a businessman. That, when you're 8, 9, 10 years old, you really don't understand that. But there were role models in my community that I looked up to. There was this one minister in our neighborhood, and every time you would see him, you would go to the grocery store and he would put on a suit. And I used to really say, wow, I want to dress like that one day. And I want people to say hello to me one day. So, mentorship and having those people that you look up to that set examples is so, so important. But I started in corporate America. I graduated college in 1974, worked with AT&T in Nashville, Tennessee, and then moved to Houston and got a job with Xerox. And how I got that job with Xerox was just on a Friday, a bunch of guys would get together and, we'd have cocktails and talk about our week. We were all professionals. And there was this guy underneath to us was listening to our conversation the whole time. And he came up about an hour later, and it was maybe 12 of us. He came up to me and he says, "Hi, I'm da-da-da with Xerox Corporation, and I would like to offer you a position with Xerox. I've listened to you for an hour, and I understand and see and hear your leadership." That's how I got my job at Xerox. And then there's a lesson inside of that. You never, Boris, know who's listening or watching. You never know, and especially with technology today. And I had a very great career corporate-wise. I'm grateful to say, I quickly moved up the companies, didn't sell copiers at Xerox even a year. Went to the engineering division, then got another promotion to the medical division, was the #1 sales rep every quarter, was fortunate in the medical division to be the #1 sales rep worldwide several years. Then went on to be the first Black in America to sell MRI and CT scanners, and then ended my career as a neurosurgical specialist with Johnson & Johnson, a division called Codman. So that was my career. Most people don't understand my career as we fast forward. And I know you have some questions in between corporate and today. At Xerox Medical System, I sold a product called Zero Radiography, which in the 80s, Boris, was the leading modality for breast cancer detection. By far, film screen mammography hadn't come on. That was our competitor, but we were by far the gold standard. And one day, lots of training. We're dealing with radiologists, so you have to know your stuff. There was only one day we talked about male breast cancer. And most of my other sales partners, most of them were men, and they didn't pay attention. Some of them actually didn't even come back after lunch because it was optional if you wanted to come back for the training on male breast cancer. And back in the 80s, that just wasn't a thing, right? And so most people didn't even come back. I did, and we'll fast forward, and I'm sure you'll ask, but that actually came to save my life.
And it's incredible, like you say, what you see, what you hear, who sees you, and what kind of connections are made in the business world and in life. But that was serendipitous for you. But as a result of your curiosity, your thirst for knowledge, and being, I suppose, an expert at your job, right? And wanting to better understand a greater range of products that you might be able to offer customers. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. I really took pride in understanding the technology, understanding the marketplace, and being the very best at it.
Are there any other particular leadership or traits for success that you took away from those 20 years in sales that you think were most helpful to you as an entrepreneur when you decided to leave that industry?
Well, one thing, I still, to this day, I credit Xerox Corporation, who in the 70s and 80s had the best training by far in marketing and sales. And my success has been from the knowledge I gained from there in marketing and knowing how to meet customer expectations 100% of the time, and knowing how to message to your customer your product offering, which is key and critical. So I still, to this day, my success in music, my success as an entrepreneur, my success in the apparel industry, I owe all to the knowledge that I gained at Xerox. And knowing that my skill set and know-how is always improving. I believe that knowledge is power. And still to this day, you know, for those of you that took the time to come in today on this chat, you know, whenever I do a speech, and I have three, in the next 2 days, I have 3 keynote speeches I'm giving. One in Dallas, one in Los Angeles. I spent last night probably a couple of hours just researching, anticipating maybe some of your questions. I still enjoy the researching. I really love that. And I use my cell phone for another purpose. I use it for Googling. I'm constantly on my phone Googling, trying to understand knowledge, and understanding the world as it's changing, and technology and concepts, and especially in this area of cancer, and understanding that we almost are there. If we can just hold on, we're almost there with finding a cure for cancer.
Also, it sounds like what you're saying is, despite your tremendous success, or in connection with your tremendous success, not despite, regardless of the level of success, regardless, because I know you do major presentations, speak on big stages, as you have done in many instances in your life, but you do it very often. You're fantastic at it. You're at a tremendous level of success in your career and your life. Preparation and learning and research is partly who you are, but partly what enables the further success. Is that how you think about it?
Yeah, it is. And you know, have you ever read the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell?
Yes, that's right.
Canadian, by the way.
Yes.
And I really enjoy it. I encourage those of you that honed in today, if you haven't read that book, please do. Malcolm talks about, to be an expert, you have to have put in 10,000 hours. So I go around the world and I ask a simple question. How many hours have you put in your craft? Have you put in 10,000 hours? You know, often I'm talking to folks in the music industry, people that want to be successful as artists in the music industry. And I ask them, how many hours of practice have you put in? Have you put in 10,000 hours? Well, the reason, Boris, I'm comfortable today talking to you is because I've put in 10,000 hours of speaking, either from a sales or in the classroom or as a public speaker. So now I feel very comfortable when I talk, and I come from a place of knowledge. Knowledge is power. And I always encourage, we never should stop wanting to learn, because when we live our passion, and I always talk about passion, that thing that excites you, that thing that made me get up this morning, actually, Boris, at about 6:30 this morning. And I was excited. I came in, I set up my lights, and no, we didn't get to use the big board in my production studio, but we had plan B. And we also had a plan C if plan B didn't work, because that's just how I think. But, you know, I was passionate about and excited about today. Went to bed last night thinking about it. Woke up this morning. That's passion. That's the fuel, like the gasoline that goes into a car. That's the fuel. When you see someone passionate, you know it. They glow. They're excited when they talk about it. Because when you live your passion, Boris, you never work a day in your life. I don't work. Now I get to live my passion. And what coexists with that is work ethics. They're like a glove. So if you see someone that's passionate, then you see someone working extremely hard. To the outsiders, they say things like, wow, they sure work real hard. Man, they're working so hard. But what you don't understand is we don't look at it that way. We look at it as gratitude and a blessing that we get to do every day what we're passionate about.
Dr. Knowles, that's beautiful, and 100% agree. And thank you for distilling it for our audience. At the same time, we're living in an age of great resignation. We're living in a situation where some people are working hard and they're pursuing their purpose and they're excited and they're passionate and they're making things happen. And unfortunately, some people are part of this phenomenon of millions of workers leaving their jobs. They're having problems finding their drive, their purpose, their fulfillment. What do you think is a way to find work-life synergy? How did you find your work-life synergy and your passion to be a producer, educator, business executive? Did that grow on you? Did you have to look for it to find it? What advice do you have for people to get into this mode that we're talking about of excitedly, with passion, working hard and making things happen?
Yeah, I think it's a real simple process. You know, Boris, we sometimes make things so complicated. You know, I'm a college professor. I've said in some of my colleagues' classes, man, it is so complicated. I believe in simplicity. Take a sheet of paper out and simply ask yourself, what are the things you love doing? What are the things, if there was nothing else in life, you would want to do? It's as simple as identifying what you love doing. And maybe you put 4 or 5 things on a piece of paper. Now, yes, of those 4 or 5 things, what is the one thing that excites me the most doing? And we often get clouded and blinded because external forces, parents, society, husbands, wives, boyfriends, they hear our passion and they downplay it. And they say, you don't want to do that, or that's not glamorous, or you're not going to make a lot of money doing that. And we allow them to undercut our dreams and our passion. Because when, again, you live that passion, it's not about money. Money comes in time when you live your passion. And when you look at that journey, you will make far more money and you'll have far greater success doing that one thing you love. And again, it might not be glamorous. It might be you just like, I don't know, tinkering with pipes, and you might become a plumber. That might be what you just love as a kid. Do you love doing that? Or playing with cars as a kid, and you grew up and you always loved driving a car. And maybe your passion is being a driver. Whatever that thing is, go for that. That's what life is about, and that's what gives us joy in life, when we find that passion. Another exercise that was given to me out of college, I interviewed for IBM, and I right out of college, and I sat there. I wanted to be a salesman, and I sat there, and the branch manager said, "I want to do an exercise." He closed the blinds. He said, I think I was 23 years old, 22 years old. And he says, now I want you to visualize that you're 42 years old. Now, again, I was 22. He wanted me to visualize that I was 42. And he started asking me all of these questions. Are you married? How many kids you have? What city do you live in? Do you have pets? What kind of car do you drive? Tell me about your wife. What type of career choice did she make? What is your career choice? How much money do you make annually? How much does your wife make? And that allowed me to visualize this journey I had to go through. So I encourage people to do that same exercise. Where do you want to be in 20 years from now? And ask yourself those same questions. What kind of home? What kind of car? Do you have kids? Do you have pets? What city do you live? What does your wife do? What does your partner does. You ask those questions. It will also help you with your passion.
That's very, very helpful and very very thoughtful and systematic exercise, and hopefully our attendees are thinking along the same lines, and if they're not, that they can use this exercise to help them advance towards passion and towards their purpose. Did you find that you wanted and had to, as a result of this desire coming from within, reinvent your passion, reinvent your purpose? How did the switch happen from being an intrapreneur in the earlier stages of your career, in the 20 years of doing medical device sales at the highest and most impactful level, to then leaving that field and setting on a new path?
Well, for me, it didn't go quite that way. Gosh, in the third grade, I sold candy. I came up with this idea. I had $5. I bought $5 worth of candy, and I was going to a Catholic school and became quite successful selling candy to the kids. Got in trouble with the nuns, so that wasn't long lived. And then as a teenager, me and two other friends of mine, we started a company with mow lawns. And every summer we bought a lawnmower, a rake, and the other equipment we needed, and we quite successful mowing lawns. That went on to when I got married, my former wife and I, we started a hair salon in Houston while I was working at Xerox Corporation. And it became one of, if not the most successful hair salon in Houston, Texas. We made our first $1 million in 1986. And so that entrepreneurship was ever growing. I always have been an entrepreneur, always have thought that way. Didn't one day decide I wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Got it. How did you combine it? How did you manage your work-life synergy in that case? Did it always flow easily coming out of your passion, or did you have to compromise? How did you balance and synergize what you were doing on several fronts at the same time, and also having a young family?
Well, there's always a price you have to pay for success. And those are really good questions. Again, I have to go back to Xerox Corporation and the knowledge that I learned there and how I was able to transfer. I've been able to transfer those skills to everything I've done professionally. And just a transfer of skills. Different product, same skill set. Different product, same skill set. I have always understood leadership and building a team, because when you build that team and hold people accountable and responsible and understand the difference in responsibility and accountability, and you listen, one of the important things of being a leader is listening. Often we talk when we should be listening. One of the characteristics also of being a leader is setting objectives, clear objectives. So everyone's clear on what the goals are for the organization. And when you do that and more, and I could talk for hours on leadership, then it doesn't require the same amount of time that it would if you're trying to do everything. If you don't know how to delegate to others and build that right team. You had the opportunity, Boris, to talk to my assistant, Lynn. Lynn's been with me now 20 plus years. My entertainment attorney has been with me 12 plus years. Young man in the office, I taught him at Texas Southern 8 years ago. He became an intern at our company When he graduated, I immediately hired him, and he's been with us from internship to the day of 8 years. So that's what happens when you build an effective team. And then the type of leadership style. You know, I have the leadership style that I want. I want feedback. I don't want an organization that become, we all have to do it this way. I want people to challenge and come up with ideas. And that's how you build, I think, a successful organization.
That's fantastic. And it goes two ways, where it appears that your leadership style and how you're thinking about teamwork, self-improvement, achievement, success, purpose is also attracting people who then, as a result, are very loyal, which I've seen from your team and what you've told me when we've spoken previously. The situation is such that it's a mutual collaboration and work in the way that these people are going further for you and for the company than they would have otherwise if you had a different approach.
Yes, and you know, when you were talking, I was thinking it makes me so proud to see that Beyoncé still has probably 40% of the team that we hired, gosh, now 30 some years ago. I mean, some of them are approaching now close to 30 years being there. And when you have that type of consistency, and you have a team that's constantly growing also, wanting to increase their skill set and wanting to increase their know-how, because you have to have people that constantly want to grow and understand, like when we go work out, Boris, we don't see immediate change.
Right.
But underneath that, there's things happening that's changing in our bodies, but it's not immediate. And that's what knowledge is. And it's sometimes not immediate, but when you put it together from a strategic standpoint, things will start happening when you're looking short-term and long-term strategically. My PhD is in strategic planning and organizational culture. Mm-hmm. It's about strategy.
100%. It's about looking far into the future and understanding that it is a journey, and then connecting the future to the present, right?
Yes.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And then you mentioned your daughter. You've mentioned the team that you've helped her currently have by building it in the first place, and her retaining a significant amount of the team. There's a situation right now due to the pandemic, the recent global events. Many people are reconsidering having children. They have growing fears about the future. Your dedication to your children's careers has become legendary. And I'm curious, what principles of parenting you think are pivotal to forming a bond within a family, helping children attain their uttermost, happiest potential and success in life and business?
Well, I think, first, as a parent, I've certainly made mistakes, but my parenting skill, you have to understand that I talked about my former wife, amazing woman, my friend to this day and always will be. She was working at the hair salon, and you work long hours on the weekends, especially Friday and Saturdays. And so I was with the kids more on the weekends when they were growing up, because she was at work. My theme always had been to Beyoncé and Solange. Just find the thing you love doing. The mistake I think a lot of parents make is we want our kids to be this blank. Fill in the blank. We want
that
our
means
kids
projecting,
to be,
right? Some of the parents' own sometimes desires, aspirations, right?
we want our kids to be doctors. So we want our kids to be attorneys because I'm an attorney and my father was an attorney. Or we want our kids to be an engineer, whatever it is. They have to find their passion, not you. And as a college professor, I've seen that more times than I want to, where kids are getting a degree in something that they don't like at all. They're not passionate about at all because their parents said, this is what you're going to get a degree in. That never, ever, ever works. It's short term. They'll go through the process, but more times than not, they end up changing career paths because it's a job. And when you start disliking going to your workplace, so I always said to them, now hear this carefully. I always said to my kids, whatever you want to be, I support you. So tell me what it is. But I also exposed them as kids. Because, you know, when they're kids, they don't quite understand yet. So I exposed them to arts. You know, fortunately, we're in Houston. So I exposed them to science. We would go to NASA and they get to see the astronaut and the spaceships. And I exposed them to a lot of things to see what their interest was. And it was always arts. It was always the arts. And so, you know, I then surrounded them with even more skills. I suggested that they start in dance. And they started in a dance troupe and they excelled in that tremendously. And then they started singing and they excelled in that. And we surrounded them with voice coaches and they excelled with that. And I always said that if my kids wanted to be doctors, I would say, encourage them to go to medical school. But when they graduate, I would have bought a hospital. Think about that. I would have bought a hospital. That's an entrepreneurial part of me.
That's very, very interesting and profound in terms of both the parents' support and enablement of children, but also something that is an approach of exposing people to what they might gravitate to and then seeing if they will or not, because if they do, then there is the very, very high potential for their success in that field. And if not, then maybe one is forcing, whether it's on children or their team members, right? Something that they will ultimately in the long term, the strategy that you talk about, not excel at, right? It might work in the short term, would not work likely in the long term, or they might not be happy, might not be as successful. Is that how you think about it?
That's the way I look at it, but also as from a parent perspective, understanding that if I have to tell my child to go to practice, and maybe they have softball practice tomorrow, and when we wake up in the morning, I have to say, hey, you know, you have softball practice today. If I have to tell them that, then it's a hobby. And that's okay. Hobbies are great. But understand the difference in passion and a hobby as a parent. Because in passion, never would you have to tell your kid practice is tomorrow. They'll be knocking on your door saying, Mommy, Daddy, you know what? Practice is in the morning. I can't be late. That's passion. So it's also understanding the difference in hobby and passion. And even with adults, we sometimes get confused with a hobby versus a passion. I enjoy, you know, one of my hobbies is I enjoy boating. You know, I really enjoy it. I don't wake up in the morning saying, you know, I want to go boating and I can't wait to go boating. You know, I'm not that passionate. It's a hobby. Occasionally I do it, but I don't wake up in the morning, go to sleep at night saying, man, I can't wait till I go boating.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair. That's absolutely fair. And then how did that further transition into you becoming a music industry executive and a producer?
Yeah, you'll see repeatedly in my life certain things. Being the first, it goes back to my child, being one of the first desegregating schools, being the first Black to sell MRI and CT scanners. You're here because when I was a child, that first day of school, I stood up and this was in junior high school, and I read, I was asked to read by my English teacher, paragraphs from Shakespeare, which was extremely challenging. The words, and I made mistakes. And all the white kids made fun of me through spitballs, and it really crushed me as a person, really crushed me. But that gave me the power of believing and the power of wanting to be the best at everything I did. Because I never, ever wanted to be placed in that situation where I felt less than. So that's a psychological thing that goes and happens in our lives as well. And maybe we'll get a point to talk about it, my years that I went to therapy. But to answer your question, you also see that I like to learn. I constantly am wanting to learn and increase my skill set. I also believe, Boris, that when we make mistakes in life, we have failures in life, we should look at those as opportunities. Some people are scratching their heads saying, what do you mean? Make a mistake, have failure, look at it as an opportunity. I believe it's an opportunity to grow and learn rather than give up and quit. So all of this came about with Beyonce's girl group losing on Star Search, which is like American Idol today, on national TV, and them crying their hearts out. I'm playing a role of 100% dad, but I couldn't see these kids heartbroken. At the same time, managed care had happened in the medical industry. And we know what that is now, Boris, where every time we go to the doctor or get a prescription or go to the hospital, the cost of it is managed. That became very impactful in a negative way on the product I was selling. And that wasn't my style of selling, the price and how much it cost. So I realized that was no longer my passion. All of this happened in the sphere of the same time. And so I decided that I was going to transition out of corporate America. Seeing my kid cry, I always loved music. So I asked myself, what is it that I love? And I had always the love of music. And so that's how I transitioned into the music industry. Went back to school, something you'll constantly hear me say. Went back to school and took all of the artist management and production and all the courses that I felt were necessary for me to achieve in the music industry. And then took all of those nuggets and tools that I learned from Xerox in corporate America. And I said earlier, I just transitioned that knowledge. Even today, not this past summer, but the last 2 summers, I've gone to professional development at Harvard. I took ethical leadership 3 years ago. I took cultural intelligence 2 years ago. I'm about to sign up for marketing. I'm constantly wanting to learn.
And that's amazing, especially Dr. Knowles, given your successful career, given that you teach, given that you write, and there's a number of books that you've written, The DNA of Achievers, Racism Through the Eyes of a Child, the Public Relations and Media Workbook, and then you're constantly learning on the other end, which is fantastic. How did you then get your footing then further? How did you build upon your entrepreneurial skills and knowledge, the what you've gained at Xerox and in other roles in the medical device sales, and then applying your passion and your interest in music, and then your kids had an interest and a passion and were doing it at a level that was gaining attention. So then how do you take all of that? Then what happened to build it into the significant enterprise and the acclaim that was reached through your efforts?
Well, because it is their passion. We talked about work ethics and how they go together. They work extremely hard to hone in to be the very best at their craft. And they understand that it's not microwave success, that you have to constantly build and learn and develop. And as a manager, my management style is also, and my parenting style was, sometimes you let them make mistakes and you hold your breath and you hope that when they fall, they get up and they haven't broken any legs. And sometimes that becomes one of the ways of managing and training and teaching, is allowing the flexibility to make mistakes in life. I mean, I've certainly made many mistakes in my life. So it's always difficult though when it's a family business, regardless of any kind of family business. And that always becomes challenging, that how do you set aside the business and now become present with the family? And that's always a hard challenge for anyone that does it.
That makes sense. That makes sense. How did you think about the business then in the music industry, in addition to and outside of working with family? Because you've had a lot of success growing artists who are not members of the family, and very many, and then also growing into other types of music. So how did you think about the evolution of that business once you had the core, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Most people don't realize Destiny's Child is not the first artist I got a record deal for.
Mm.
It was actually a rapper in Houston who I got the first record deal. And it was a major record deal. And you're right, I've had the opportunity to work with Earth, Wind and Fire, Shaka Khan, and Kool and the Gang, and OJ's, and build a #1 gospel label. You know, so we've had a tremendous success in the music industry. But I lost my passion for it. And I have always been an educator. Because when you're a manager, you're really an educator. You're teaching people. You're motivating people. And I've always loved that. And that's why today, I'm even transitioning now, Boris, out of the classroom. And today's passion is being a motivational speaker. I just left London for a week. You know, I'll be all over before the end of this year. I just love doing it. I love getting in front of people and motivating them and sharing my life experiences and understanding that in my vulnerability lies my safety. When I can talk to people and be authentic and understanding that there's a chaotic part of me and a chaotic part of self that I can share, that people can connect with, and they can look at their own life experiences and see that there's a power of believing. I love that. That's where I am today.
That's fantastic. And then in terms of that journey, that new journey that you're on right now of public speaking, of empowering others, of sharing your insights, do you find that it was harder to start this new journey or easier in this most recent stage in your career, what kind of advice do you have for people who are starting new phases of their lives, that are starting new journeys, like what you're doing, and the kind of new challenges that you're undertaking? What advice do you have for people who are working to do something that is a new stage of their life?
Get as much knowledge as you can and experience. You know, again, as a salesperson, you actually have an audience and you're getting that person on the other side of the table to buy into your story. As a professor, I have an audience and it's getting my students to buy in to my lecture. So for me, the transition was easy because strategically I had planned it, quite frankly. This was a plan that when I got to this part and phase of my life, that my wife and I could travel around the world and I could be on that stage and motivate around the world. So that has been a goal and we're achieving that goal. I'm proud of it. And I just absolutely enjoy it.
It's
because I have a lot to say. I have a lot to say in my lifetime. You know, I was in Dallas, Texas years ago, Boris, and I just came out with my first book, The DNA of Achievers. And I'm about to give a presentation in front of a couple of hundred people. And at the end of it, I was going to sell my books and we'll sign it. So I flew to Dallas and I had 5 boxes of books. And so when I got to the hotel, I had someone come out, put the books on the, and then help me take them to the room, a bellman. And I never forget, we were in a hallway and we just kept walking and walking. And I said, sir, where is my room? And he looked at me and he said, Dr. Knowles, it's not the destination, it's the journey. And I've never forgotten of how in our lifetimes, things sometimes will go wrong and awry, and we just never give up. We understand that life is a learning experience, and we change the way we look at things. At least I have. Is that when things happen that don't quite go the way that we want them to, I look at that and say, what did I learn? What was the opportunity? Just like when I was diagnosed with cancer, I said, what is the opportunity? Well, the opportunity was for me to share this experience with others, because early detection of genetics, a lot of people don't know, or they don't realize the importance of early detection of genetics. And so if I can share that and save lives, then that's a meaningful passion for me. If I can save one life, that's quite meaningful for me.
Dr. Knowles, thank you. And in that vein, what would you advise people regarding their health? What would you advise people in terms of thinking about how their busy lives often impede them from seeking help and assessment? How can their fears and inhibitions be effectively dissolved to save lives? You mentioned that male breast cancer was something that some of your colleagues in the medical device field weren't paying as much attention to as some other inflictions that were being treated by other types of equipment. What would you tell people in terms of how you think they should be taking care of their health and taking it as a priority?
Well, without health, there's no wealth. It impedes on lifestyle, it impedes on family members. So understand that. It's just sometimes unbelievable to me how, just like you said, Boris, like we get in the rat race of life, trying to be the very best at it. And we don't understand the importance of our health, of just going and getting early diagnosis. screening exams for prostate, screening exams for breast cancer, screening exams for heart disease. They're all there, all available. And genetic screening now is a saliva sample. Had I known, Boris, that I could simply take a saliva sample and it could tell me that I was predisposed for cancer, and it could tell me I was predisposed for heart disease, I would have got that years ago. I didn't know. Just like some people right now don't know that you can get a simple $250 saliva test, and you have a consultation with doctors, and they can tell you, what does that mean to know that you're predisposed? It means you change your lifestyle. It means you exercise. It means you lose weight. It means you reduce your alcohol intake and sugar intake. It means that you reduce stress. You change your lifestyle. And that was available, and I didn't know it. And it still angers me that I didn't know it. So that's why I enjoy and am passionate about letting people know that these things exist that can change your life. So it's very important, the power of early detection. And fortunately, I was stage 1. You know, fortunately, I only take a pill for the next 5 years, and I'm on year 3.5. But I do the things. Every year, I know I have a high risk of BRCA2 mutated. I know that I have a high propensity of possibly getting prostate cancer. So every year I get a prostate MRI. I know I have a higher risk of getting pancreatic cancer. So I get a pancreatic MRI once a year. I get a blood test once a year. I get a PSA once a year. And to think that taking one day out of my life, which is what that will require, could save my life, impact not only my life, but not being selfish and understanding that if I get terminally ill, it impacts my family, then it's worth one day of your life doing that. So I encourage people to do it today. Stop putting it off. Call today and make the appointment.
Dr. Knowles, thank you for that important, empathetic, and forward-looking, helpful message. What are you excited about the most in your life right now, in this stage of the career? And what are you excited for the most in the world that you're seeing in the business community? What excites you right now?
Well, technology does. You know, I think, you know, technology is impacting us in every way. And if you look at, I think COVID, again, what I said earlier, you know, when we see things going and happening bad in our lives, sometimes it could be an opportunity. And unfortunately, many people died. Some died that didn't have to die because of COVID, because of lack of knowledge and information. That's why it's so important. But COVID also taught us that we could quickly come to an answer. I mean, we found a cure for COVID in a year and a half, because it became a priority. And I'm fortunate that I get to sit in on meetings and understand some of the things that are happening in the detection of cancer, to eradicate cancer. Some things in Canada with simple water and oxidation of water. Things happening in the US, we're taking medicines that already exist, that's already been FDA approved, and applying those as cancer treatments. So there are some really remarkable things happening in the field of medicine and technology. I'm very excited that, because not only would it save my life, it'll save my grandkids. So I'm excited about technology. I'm excited about technology as it exists. We're beginning to understand social media differently. You know, I was one that in the very beginning was totally against it, but I think you use social media as a tool, as a marketing tool. And for entrepreneurs who understand that, it's an amazing marketing tool, social media. So we're looking at that differently than we did, say, 10 years ago. I'm excited what's happening in music. The future of music, you would not just hear music, you'll see music. And by that, what I mean, every time you have that experience, you'll see the video and audio at the same time. I'm excited about what's happening in that technology. I'm excited about the technology we're doing today. 10 years ago, Zoom, what the hell was that? I knew it was there, but it was so complex, complicated, and
Right.
awkward. And now it allows us to reach many people in a multidimensional way. And so those type of technologies really excite me. And then when I look at what's happening in the world that we live in and how information is easily available. But I'm also excited about the social courage that exists. How social courage means that you speak up and you speak out quicker, sooner, faster. When you see racism or sexism or xenophobia, homophobia, having that social courage in the world, that no longer are we going to turn our heads when we see it happen. We're going to speak up and speak out sooner, quicker, faster. That encourages me.
That's amazing, Dr. Knowles. And I'm sure your excitement is transferring to our attendees. I'm certainly feeling very excited and inspired. And thank you very much for our insightful conversation, sharing a glimpse into your journey and the DNA of success of you, of Dr. Mathew Knowles, and others whom you've interacted with and whom you've studied. And thank you very much for spending this time with us. Thank you for your time and this conversation, Dr. Knowles.
Well, thank you. And I encourage folks, if they'd like to know more, just simply go to MathewKnowles.com. They can find out a lot about what I'm doing. And they also can go there to book me to speak.
That sounds great, Dr. Knowles. We've shared the website. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Knowles. Have a great rest of your day as well.
Thank you, Boris. Great job.
Great speaking with you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.